I'm Bill Hubshirt.
And I'm Lori Meggs, and welcome to Focus on Marshall. We're here right outside the gates of Redstone Arsenal on a very exciting day for a very special ceremony.
Yeah, kind of a birthday party of sorts.
That's right. The George C. Marshall Space Flight Center turns 50.
And we are here to mark the occasion with the unveiling of an historic marker to celebrate this important milestone.
That's right. And we're also going to get to talk to some of the great folks who've contributed to America's space program.
We've had a chance to catch up with some of our colleagues here and to sit down with a few as well.
So let's get right to it. I'm here with Marshall Center Director Robert Lightfoot. And Robert, today is all about the work of generations. Tell us what that means to the team here.
Well, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. We got a historical marker we're going to dedicate today to recognize Marshall Space Flight Center's contribution to the state of Alabama and the nation. So it's kind of cool, and as you know, our 50th anniversary has been all about the work of generations. Everything we get to do builds off the first folks that were here that started us on this path 50 years ago today.
Personally, what's it like for you to be the Center Director of the Marshall Center?
Well, it's exciting. It's a great opportunity to get to lead a cool bunch of folks that really love what they do and really have a great passion for exploration, and just being on top of that group is pretty humbling, frankly, because they're so daggum smart and so good at what they do. But just trying to lead at this time is it's an interesting time with everything going on and all the changes. But it's fun. We're having a good time with it.
I'm glad you said all those nice things about me. Thank you, Robert, for your time today.
Well, the dignitaries certainly have come out. Charles Scales has joined us. He's the Associate Deputy Administrator for the agency. And Mr. Scales, thanks for coming down from Washington, D.C. for this one.
Sure, happy to do it. Always good to come back to the Tennessee Valley. Yeah.
So you spent half of Marshall's 50 years here at Marshall. Tell us a little bit about how you got started down here.
Well, I started here as a cooperative education student in January 1973. This beautiful center was only 12 years old at that point. So I started as a co-op from A&M in the Office of Telecommunications. Okay.
What other departments did you end up spending some time in while you were here?
Gosh, a lot. I started in telecommunications, and I worked in program control in the facilities office and resources management in the information systems office, plans and analysis in the Center Operations Directorate, and I was the Equal Opportunity Officer here for about 4.5 years.
So a lot of time in building 4200.
Correct. And a lot of time in building 4200. I enjoyed every day of it. Okay.
So considering that you got your start with the agency here at Marshall, what does this marking this anniversary mean to you?
Oh, it's a great opportunity. When I started to work here, we were getting prepared for the Apollo-Soyuz mission, which is our first link up with what was the Soviet Union, which was a major milestone in international relations. And we were also making preparations for the Skylab mission. And, we were also making great plans for the start of the shuttle program. So it was an exciting time to be here.
Well, it's exciting that we were able to have you here, and we appreciate you coming down for this.
Sure, happy to do it.
Alex, thank you for inviting us into your home today. We have a lot of ground to cover since you started working at Redstone Arsenal in 1954. Let's start there. Tell us what it was like.
Well, you have to look at the community. Huntsville was very small. Probably didn't have 50,000 people. The Germans had just come in 1950 from Fort Bliss, Texas. And of course, Redstone Arsenal, they just started, and the Germans had already started looking at a Redstone missile for the Army. We all worked for the Army in those days. We worked on the Explorer satellite. In fact, I was in propulsion in those days, and I sized the tanks, and there was a lot of activity going on for the Explorer. Secretary of Defense decided the Navy would be putting up first satellite. Sputnik had come along. We could put ours up first, and that's in the history books. You can find that. But we were told to put ours in the warehouse. In the meantime, the Navy tries twice, couldn't do it. Von Braun says, we can do it. So they told us to go ahead and do it, and we did. So the next thing we started looking at, besides for the Redstone, modified it to put up a suborbital flight, which was Alan Shepard's flight. He flew, I think it was May 5th, 1961, suborbital. He just went up and down, but he was our first person in space. So we felt like we were getting there, but we hadn't gone in orbit yet. Now later on was John Glenn's flight.
How did you transition to the Saturn program? You'd worked on the Redstone rocket. How difficult was that at the time?
Well, some of the work, the technical work, the challenges were tremendous, but we had to cluster engines. Von Braun had this idea of putting things together, and we were able to take the tanks, Redstone tanks with 70-inch in diameter, liquid oxygen tanks 105 inch, and we clustered those and clustered the engines. Now the nightmare was a plumber's nightmare. We had all these lines getting the propellants out of the tanks into the engines. Had to deal with that. You had crosstalk. You had to continue the pressurization of the tanks. When you go during ascent, you had to, because the propellants are coming out, you had to keep pressure in there. You didn't want the tanks to be sucked in because of atmospheric pressure. But all this was a precursor in helping us to understand how you cluster engines, how do you get the propellants, how you do the pressurization and the propellants and dealing with those for Saturn V. Because now we were going to 1.5 million pounds thrust per engine. So we had to deal with 5 engines, 7.5 million pounds of thrust. I mean, it was a nightmare, number one, with the engines, getting the engines developed. We blew up pumps, I'm telling you, wrecked test stands, lots and lots of that. And so after that, reconciling those problems, have a big meeting here at Marshall, and I was fortunate to participate in that meeting. Dr. von Braun, his boss, all our corporate presidents were here, and George Low had suggested we fly man around the moon, okay? Concern again this technological race with the Russians, and thought we could do it. So they go to the moon, and then everything was okay. All the systems worked good, and we were watching that, bated breath and everything. But they get ready to go around the moon. Frank Borman has the Bible, and he's going to read about the creation account in the book of Genesis.
And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good.
And the classic is when they go around the moon and they're looking back at Earth, and there's a picture of the Earth. And you've seen it, most people have seen that. I get goosebumps thinking about it even now as we talk. When we launched, like all the Apollo vehicle, the whole thing, everything go into the water. We lose it. So in the meantime, smart guy said, well, hey, why don't we design something like an airplane, at least bring some of it back to save the money, reuse it. So we started looking at shuttle. And then later on, 1970, I went to a task team for 2 years, getting the configuration of which we fly today.
What is Marshall?
Well, first, Marshall, to me, is an organization. It's a living organization, and I just hope they can get something to continue the engineering. We've always had excellent leadership, see, starting with von Braun, then his team that he had been brought over with him. So, no question, when you think about a government organization, NASA is number one. Nothing compared to NASA.
Alex, thank you so much. This has been so interesting, and we really appreciate your time. Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you, Laura. I've enjoyed it.
The Marshall Space Flight Center is known as a propulsion center, but it also has made many contributions in science. We're here to talk with a man who has spent 30 years here in science, Dr. Don Frazier. Thanks very much for taking the time, sir, to talk to us today.
Thank you.
Let's start back when you were a small boy growing up in Detroit. How did you discover that you wanted to become involved in science?
If I saw a picture of someone from NASA, I had utmost respect for that person because that was one of the people that John Glenn and others like him depended on. And I said, this has got to be a first-rate organization. And so I wanted to be a part of it. One of the things that I think we've contributed here from NASA is the ability to grow really good crystals. Some of these crystals are important in such things as infrared detectors, for example. You want a certain degree of perfection. I mentioned earlier the possibility of nonlinear optics as a futuristic way of doing computing, for example. We have demonstrated that in the past. Protein crystal growth, that was a biggie back in the microgravity days, where if you can grow a perfect crystal of protein, you can do X-ray diffraction on that perfect crystal, and sometimes you can do some pharmaceutical type. How does aspirin work, for example? And so that was a biggie. Protein crystal growth, that was a big deal back during the microgravity days. There was a lot of accomplishment there. Larry DeLucas down at UAB did quite a bit of work in that area, and others, not just him. The production of certain types of aerogels, for example, in microgravity, or zeolites. People have used it for purification of atmosphere. I'm talking about microgravity related things, but there are other things that are non-microgravity related that NASA of course, from the propulsion standpoint, have been very instrumental in developing. NASA is not just this side of the, there's also the telescopes, there's the optics, there's Chandra, there's our ability to look out at the edge of the universe, near the edge of the universe, back in time, near the creation, We've done so many things, it's difficult to compare what's more important than others. We're getting more into earth sciences where we're looking at moving detectors on moving platforms and determining melting of ice, how fast that rate is. I mean, this has a lot to do with our current focus on climate control and climate conditions and that sort of thing. So all of these things are probably not comparable to each other, but all are extremely important, if not to our existence, certainly to our knowledge of the universe that we live in. Computing, optical computing, and quantum computing, and these sort of things that NASA is playing a role in helping to develop flexible electronics. The fact that now we'll be able to print circuits and photovoltaics on paper and very light, low mass. NASA is very interested in low mass and high efficiency devices. We can print a way of collecting energy from the sun and storing it and printing the storage medium and printing light emitting diodes on a piece of paper, which is what we're working on now. This is some of the stuff I'm working on right now. That's going to have a huge impact on my own personal view and the nation.
Dr. Frazier, thanks very much for your time today.
Well, I thank you for taking the time with me. This has been nice to talk about. It's not just work anymore. It's fun.
Bonnie, it was so gracious of you to have us in your home today. Can you tell us what it was like, first of all, working at Redstone, and then tell me what the first meeting was like?
Well, he was so friendly, he was so cordial. He was just, I felt like I had known him. He was a very nice man.
You really became his right-hand lady, right?
Well, a lot of people called me that. He called me the lady I worked for.
What was your role?
What was my role? Well, secretary, flunky, whatever. There were so many things to do, and he was a very busy man, of course, and was in conferences all day. I would have, by the time he'd come from the meeting, I'd have his briefcase packed with reading material, and then we would go through the stack on his desk. I had it prioritized, and he always took his briefcase home with him, and the next morning when he came in, he would turn it upside down, dump it on my desk, and say, "I did my homework." He was kind of the absent-minded professor. He would leave his umbrellas, or he usually carried his pillow with him on every trip, because he had to have, he said he couldn't sleep without his pillow. And he'd leave it at the hotels. I'd have to find somebody who was on travel in Washington or wherever he had been to go get his pillow and bring it when they come back to Marshall.
So he decides to switch you from the Army, or move everyone from the Army to NASA, and President Eisenhower comes to Marshall. Tell me about that. You got to escort him, right?
Yes, I did. They had an outdoor stage, and I got to escort President Eisenhower to the stage. Dr. von Braunâs escorted Mrs. Marshall, and that's when he named us officially the George C. Marshall Space Flight Center, which now just goes by Marshall Space Flight Center, but it was in honor of the late General George C. Marshall.
So what did he say to you once his rocket made it to the moon?
Well, he went from the Cape to Houston to Mission Control, of course, to watch the mission, and he stayed through the lunar landing, and so I didn't see him or talk to him during that period until he got back to the office, and he came in with a big grin on his face and said, "Mission accomplished." Went straight to his desk then.
Back to work.
Back to work, because his desk was full, covered.
Bonnie, it was so sweet of you to let us come see you today. We are so appreciative. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Lori, it was really exciting to meet so many people instrumental to the success of this center.
Very humbling and inspiring, a great group of people and a great day here at Marshall. Join us next time as we focus on Marshall.